The 1980s. Offshore powerboat racing was the undisputed king of coastal cool. Sleek, thunderous machines flying across the turquoise waters of South Florida, piloted by daredevils chasing glory. Miami was its glittering epicenter, a mecca for speed, sun, and the intoxicating scent of high-octane fuel. This was a sport of raw power, immense wealth, and ever-present danger, where fortunes were won and lost in the blink of an eye. But beneath the sun-drenched glamour, a dark tide was rising. As these maritime missiles pushed the limits of speed and endurance, another, more sinister enterprise was finding them the perfect tool. This is the story of how the exhilarating world of powerboat racing collided head-on with the brutal reign of the Cocaine Cowboys. A time when drug money didn't just sponsor teams, it owned them, turning champions into criminals and staining a thrilling sport with violence and corruption. This is the dark history of when cocaine was king and powerboats were its roaring chariots. The heart of this world was Northeast 188th Street in North Miami Beach, better known as Thunderboat Row. Here, legendary figures like Don Aronow, the visionary behind iconic brands like Cigarette, Donzi, Formula, and Magnum Marine, crafted an entirely new breed of vessel. His deep V hulls weren't just boats, they were weapons-grade speed platforms, designed to conquer the open ocean at blistering velocities. These weren't just fast, they were revolutionary, built for endurance, capable of incredible range, and able to slice through brutal seas. Aronow and his contemporaries were pushing the boundaries of marine engineering, creating the ultimate symbols of power and freedom. Boats like the Cigarette 38 Top Gun, the Donzi Aronow's creations, and later, Ben Kramer's Apache Warriors became legends. But the very qualities that made them champions on the racecourse, their blistering speed, their rugged construction, their ability to cover vast distances, also made them irresistibly attractive to a new kind of clientele emerging from Miami's booming drug trade. They were perfect for outrunning the Coast Guard, perfect for hauling illicit fortunes from South America to Florida's shores. The line between racer and smuggler was about to get very, very blurry. Miami in the 1980s was a city drowning in cocaine. It was the gateway for Colombian cartels, and fortunes were being made overnight. With that kind of money came power, influence, and an insatiable appetite for the high life. And what was more high-profile, more adrenaline-fueled than offshore powerboat racing? Enter the Cocaine Cowboys, a new breed of outlaw who saw the sport not just as a passion, but a perfect extension of their criminal empires. At the forefront were Willy Falcon and Sal Magluta, known as Los Muchachos. These high school dropouts built a staggering $2 billion cocaine empire, importing at least 75 tons of the drug into the United States. But incredibly, while running one of the largest trafficking rings in history, they were also celebrated powerboat racing champions. Sal Magluta's Team Seahawk, with its distinctive bright colors, clinched 3 U.S. national championships. Falcon's Team Cougar also roared to victory, taking the 1986 Offshore Challenge. The audacity was breathtaking. Magluta even served as a commissioner for the American Powerboat Association, the sport's governing body. Then there was Benjamin Kramer, better known as Ben Kramer. A skilled and fearless racer, he took the 1986 U.S. Open Class Offshore Championship in his formidable boat, Apache Warpath. Kramer wasn't just a racer, he owned Apache powerboats, building some of the era's most sought-after performance machines. He was also a major drug kingpin, deeply involved in marijuana and cocaine smuggling on a massive scale, funneling millions into his racing operations and those of associates like Randy Lanier's IMSA car racer. For these men, powerboat racing was a multifaceted tool. It was a way to launder staggering amounts of cash, a high-profile stage to flaunt their wealth and egos, and a practical testing ground for the very vessels they used in their smuggling operations. The adrenaline of dodging a Coast Guard cutter wasn't so different than the thrill of a race start. Their lives were a blur of drug deals and victory celebrations, often converging at notorious Miami hotspots like the Mutiny Hotel in Coconut Grove, where traffickers, racers, celebrities, and law enforcement all uneasily mingled. The influx of drug money transformed offshore powerboat racing almost overnight. Suddenly, teams had seemingly limitless budgets. Boats became bigger, faster, and exponentially more expensive. Custom-built catamarans and deep V hulls, powered by multiple roaring engines, pushed the limits of what was thought possible. The spectacle was undeniable, but it came at a cost. Legitimate racers, relying on traditional sponsorships and personal fortunes, found it increasingly difficult to compete. The financial playing field was brutally uneven. An outlaw image began to cling to the sport, initially perhaps adding to its dangerous allure, but soon evolving into a serious concern. As early as 1979, an Office of Justice Programs report titled "Powerboat Racing Has Gone to Pot" noted that boats, shelled out for special duty, were already being used. Within the wider racing world, particularly in IMSA sports car racing, where figures like Randy Lanier suddenly appeared with enormously successful, unsponsored teams, whispers and outright accusations of mysterious funding became common. The IMSA paddock was even jokingly and tellingly dubbed the International Marijuana Smugglers Association. Legitimate competitors like Bob Kaiser, a respected champion, would later speak of the dangers of the era, of losing friends not just to the inherent risks of high-speed racing, but to the encroaching darkness. The line between sport and crime was becoming dangerously thin, and the consequences would be deadly. The ultimate price of this unholy alliance was paid on February 3, 1987. Don Aronow, the king of Thunderboat Row, the man whose designs had defined a generation of speed, was brutally gunned down in broad daylight on the very street that was synonymous with his name. His murder sent shockwaves through the racing world and Miami. Aronow was a complex figure. He sold his champion boats to everyone: racers, celebrities, legitimate businessmen, and, undeniably, to major drug smugglers. He even built the Blue Thunder catamarans for the U.S. Customs Service, boats designed to chase down the very smugglers who often piloted his other creations. It was this Blue Thunder contract that reportedly led to his death. Aronow had sold his company, USA Racing, which held the customs contract, to Ben Kramer. When the U.S. Customs Service refused to do business with a known drug trafficker like Kramer, Aronow was forced to retract the sale. Aronow was allegedly subpoenaed to testify against Kramer, and was killed shortly before he was due to appear. Years later, Ben Kramer, already serving a life sentence for drug trafficking, would plead non-coast to manslaughter in Aronow's death. The Aronow murder ripped the glamorous facade off the sport, exposing the violent reality simmering beneath. It was clear that the Cocaine Cowboys weren't just playing at being racers, they were deadly serious criminals, and powerboat racing was now their battleground. The brazenness couldn't last. As the 1980s bled into the 1990s, federal law enforcement intensified its efforts to dismantle Miami's drug empires. One by one, the powerboat racing kingpins were brought down. Willy Falcon and Sal Magluta were indicted in 1991. Their subsequent trial was a circus of corruption and intimidation that eventually saw them convicted. Ben Kramer was already deep in a life sentence. The fallout for powerboat racing was catastrophic. Its reputation was in tatters, inextricably linked with drug smuggling, murder, and organized crime. Legitimate corporate sponsors fled, unwilling to be associated with the tarnish. Mainstream media interest, which had once celebrated the sport's daring and glamour, now focused on its criminality. The high-octane party was definitively over. The sport went into a period of decline, struggling to shed its dark past. Efforts were made to clean up its image, to move away from the era of cartel cash and rebuild trust. The U.S. Coast Guard and Customs, having been outrun and outmaneuvered for years, adapted their tactics and technology, a direct legacy of the challenge posed by these souped-up smuggling vessels. The era of the Cocaine Cowboys on the water remains a shocking cautionary tale in motorsports history. It was a time when unparalleled speed and unimaginable wealth collided with brutal criminality, fueled by a seemingly endless river of drug money. The thunder of those incredible machines echoed with a dangerous double meaning, their wakes stirring up more than just salt water.
Offshore powerboat racing eventually found its way back, more regulated, perhaps less wild, but still a breathtaking display of power and skill. Yet, the ghosts of the 1980s linger, a stark reminder of a time when champions of the sea were also kings of a deadly trade, and the race for glory became a dance with darkness on the glittering waters of Miami.